Welcome to part 2 of the SCRA video. Again, my name is Beverly Allen. I am a Tacoma-based attorney. I am also a judge advocate in the Washington Army National Guard. The views expressed in this slide presentation are my own, and the material has been modified from standard Army training videos. I am going to cover part 2 now of the SCRA, which is the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act. And part 2 will cover domicile, it will cover waiver of SCRA protections, and it will cover COVID-19 specific protections that also affect service members. All right, so domicile. Why might someone want to change their domicile? Well, there's many reasons. One of them may be to get different tax benefits. In Washington state, we do not currently have a state income tax. So the SCRA, acknowledging that there might be tax benefits to service members and families who are moved around based on their military service, makes it easier to establish domicile in perhaps a more favorable state for tax purposes. So if the spouse is residing with the service member, then the spouse can also get that income tax protection by virtue of being married and by virtue of the SCRA. And that prevents the spouse from having to go through the hoops that they would normally do to establish domicile under state rules. Again, we're looking at the marital relationship and the nature of the military service. So, ways to help establish or maintain domicile. Again, in addition to just being married to the soldier, you may have to also have additional factors that you can prove, such as purchasing a home, registering to vote, registering vehicles, physical presence, driver's license, a membership in organizations, or a bank account or investments in the state where you are trying to establish domicile. Again, the SCRA makes it easier, but you also have to do something that would suggest that it's fair to the state where you're trying to establish domicile and to get domicile. Now, can SCRA protections be waived? Yes, they can. And in fact, we see waivers, in fact, not really explicit waivers, but when someone who is in, for example, a divorce or a custody suit is hiring an attorney and the attorney is then representing them, helping them settle the case, even going to trial, despite that active duty military, that is the service member stating to the court that they are aware that they're protected. They could have asked for a stay perhaps, but they're waiving that ability. They're hiring an attorney. They're pursuing the case that way. To do an explicit waiver, the waiver has to be in writing. It has to be 12-point font. It has to be a separate contract, separate from the original obligation. And it has to be executed during or after the period of active duty. So someone may, for example, elect to opt out of the 6% cap on interest or otherwise waive a right that they have under the SCRA. This is something that they could contract for, and I would expect or hope that they're getting a benefit out of waiving the SCRA rights, but that waiver is possible. All right, so COVID-19 protections, and again, this is as of September 18th, 2020. There are currently federal, state, and local evictions moratoriums. This will help service members as well as other members of the community. The CDC is the federal eviction moratorium, and there is a separate video as part of the Vibrant Community series on the CDC moratorium with attorney Adam Birnbaum. I recommend that you view that video and those materials as well. But to get the CDC protection, which affects all states, all cities in the US, you need to do a declaration and submit that. So the declaration of eligibility requires that the person, so whether it's a service member, a family member, or a member of the community, show that they've used their best efforts to obtain all government assistance that's available. Also, that person has to earn less than $99,000 per year. They have to be unable to pay their rent or make their full housing payment due to substantial loss in household income, loss of compensable hours of work, or layoffs, or extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses. The person also needs to certify they're using their best efforts to make timely partial payments that are as close to the full payment as possible, that if evicted, they're likely to be homeless, and that they understand they must still pay rent. If that person has that declaration, meets all those criteria, that halts all evictions until December 31st, 2020. After that date, the housing provider may require payments in full. So it doesn't discharge the tenant's obligation to pay rent. That will have to be dealt with at a later time. The purpose of these moratoriums is to keep people from being homeless during this pandemic. As a side note, in Pierce County, the Center for Dialogue and Resolution is helping tenants mediate payment plans with their landlords. So they are a great resource to check out if that is a concern for either landlords or tenants. So in conclusion, we've covered procedural protections under the SCRA in part 1. We also covered default judgments and how to get a judgment despite service member status in part 1 as well. And in part 2, we talked about domicile, we talked about waiver of SCRA protections, we talked about COVID-19 and evictions moratoriums, which are also available to soldiers. The SCRA and other federal and state laws can protect service members and their families against a wide variety of issues that may come up that are service connected or service related. So it's a very important piece of legislation. Again, SCRA protections apply based on status, so that's not necessarily a deployment status, which is why part 1 talks about default judgments and service members who may be stationed in garrison and are still entitled to the protections against default judgments. So legal assistance attorneys, such as your local judge advocate's office, can provide more guidance, can also provide resources and referrals for SCRA related problems and issues. And with that, any questions, you can direct them to me, Beverly Allen, at TacomaLegalCoach.com. I also have a Facebook page. My phone number is 253-778-6376. And thank you very much for watching and participating in the Pierce County Law Library's Vibrant Community Series video project.